Hi, YouTube. My name's Gerardo and I'm an addict. I came over to YouTube from fucking TikTok, right? And I want to expand this fucking platform. And I thought a good way to do it was by telling you guys my story and and allowing you guys to get to know me, right? So, my name's Gerardo and I'm an addict, and I identify as an addict because the moment I put any drugs and alcohol into my system, I lose all control. The moment I put any type of mood, mind altering substances into my body, my life becomes unmanageable. And I wake up that fucking monster that has laid dormant for fucking 8 years now. My clean date is November 5th, 2014. I've managed to maintain my recovery, my sobriety, and my clean time since then. And it's been quite a fucking journey, and I want to share you that journey with you guys, and I think it's good to start off like from my childhood to where I'm at now, right? So I grew up in a studio apartment with my mom, my grandmother, and four fucking brothers, right? I am the second oldest. I have an older brother, and it's hard to talk about it sometimes, right? I have an older brother and I have three younger siblings. I always start off by saying that my first addiction was love and affection. There was something about me as a kid, where I always felt as though I wasn't good enough. I always felt as though, I didn't fit into the family, I saw my older brother always favorite my younger brothers, and I didn't understand why. Like, I didn't understand why the fuck he would always show them love and affection, but never me, right? Like I wanted that from him, and that's what ended up leading to, in a sense, him abusing me. I remember like the first time the abuse began to take place, right? Like, I remember, and it's sick to say, but like he offered me candy, and I said yes, because he was never nice to me, ever, ever, ever. He was never nice to me. So I said yes, like I want candy, and that ended up to him leading me to the bathroom and having me do stuff on him, right? you know and this was my older brother, and I was like, okay, so this is what I gotta do for him to fucking love me, right? That sick and demented fucking thinking that I had at 5 years old, right? Like, I wanted him to love me, so I was willing to do whatever it was that he told me to fucking do at that age, even though it was fuck and sick and twisted and it was fucking wrong, but I just wanted his love. The abuse took place for quite a few years. The people always ask, well, where was your mom? See, the abuse took place when my mom used to take my grandmother to the hospital. My grandmother was always fucking sickly, like always sickly, 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 so my mom would leave us with my older brother, to watch over us or whatever. And that's when the abuse took place. Like I said, I was between 5 and 6 years old, and the fact that my brother abused me, like, just opened the door for ongoing abuse to take place. Like, I remember my brother would try to get the other kids in the building to do the same thing to me. I remember on one occasion, like, one of the neighbor's kids pulled my plants down, and like he tried to do something and he couldn't, right? And that night I was really, really uncomfortable, and I was tossing and turning, and I was itching, and I was crying, and I told my mom, like, my mom was like, "What's wrong, Hera?" Like, it was in the middle of the night, and I told her, and she was like, "What happened?" And I told her, so and so did this to me, like he pulled my pants down, whatever, right? And my mom went in the middle of the night, woke up the neighbor's dad, and they come over. So there is the neighbor's dad and his son standing in front of me, and they're yelling at this kid, "What the fuck did you do to him? What the fuck did you do to him?" The dad slaps his son. My fucking brother pulls me into the kitchen, and he's like, "You better fucking tell them you're lying." So I walk out and I'm like, "Mom, I made it up," but I hadn't made it up. Like, it had happened, but once again, I was being silenced. Once again, I felt that I needed to be fucking quiet, right? Like, I felt that I needed to listen to what the fuck he was saying. Anyways, the abuse continued to take place. My brother ended up getting too bad on, I guess, on drugs, right? So my mom shipped him off to live with his dad, and that's when the abuse stopped. When it came to my brother, that's when the abuse stopped. We used to live in a three-story building, right? It was like a three-story building in downtown LA. We grew up really poor. My grandmother had her own apartment upstairs. We had our apartment downstairs. But I used to always stay with my grandmother. Like, I would always love spending the night. I would always like going to her apartment because, like, my grandmother took care of me. Like, she babied me. Nobody knew what my brother had done, right? Nobody knew that he had abused me. Like, nobody knew. Like, I kept that shit a secret. Sorry, you guys. So, anyways, you know um so what ends up happening is my mom ends up meeting this fucking man, right? And she ends up getting pregnant by him, and she ends up taking off overnight, like over fucking night. She takes off to Tijuana and takes my brothers. Like, she literally packs her shit in the middle of the night and takes off with my brothers. And that night I had been with my grandmother, so she calls my grandmother and she's like, "Ma, let me talk to Hera." So my mom gets me on the phone, right? And she was like, "Hey, I'm gonna be living in Tijuana. Do you wanna come live with me?" And I was like, no, I'm gonna stay with my grandmother. Like, I already knew like Tijuana was not good news, right? So I ended up staying with my grandmother, and my mom lived in Tijuana for years, and we were separated. And I had like a lot of abandonment issues, right? Like, why the fuck did you leave me? Like, you left for a man, you left for another kid, like, you like straight like took off, and like didn't really care, but my grandmother protected me in a sense. My grandmother kept me safe. My grandmother fed me. Like, I knew that I was going to be okay with my grandmother, right? My grandmother used to do everything she possibly could. Like, she would sell clothes on the weekends, like do yarderia or whatever, a yard sale every fucking weekend. She would do like decorations. She would do shit like that to like to make money, and on top of that she would get welfare and food stamps from me or whatever, right? So anyways, we end up upgrading, we got a one bedroom apartment, and through Section 8. And throughout this whole time, like, my grandmother was a devout fucking Catholic, a devout Catholic. So we used to go to church, Saturday and Sundays, like full day retreats, and we used to sell food at this full day retreats, like, I was a little ass kid and I'd be like, tacos, 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 because she would sell like taquitos dorados or whatever, right? And I'd be like trying to sell them. And I met amazing people at the church. I met Noel Diaz. This is all in downtown LA, St. Thomas the Apostle. I met Noel Diaz, and I remember asking him, like, "Hey, I don't have a dad. Do you want to be my dad?" Like, and he was like, "Yeah, of course." So he was like a father figure, right? Like, this guy took me under his wing, and like, he was a father figure, so he decided to put me in private school. He was paying tuition, for me to go to St. Thomas the Apostle Catholic school, and like, when I went to that Catholic school, I felt so inferior. I felt so less than. I felt so like I didn't fucking belong here. Like, it was like, I was like, I was out of place. All these kids had nice stuff, and like, I was just a low budget bitch. Like, I mean, my grandmother didn't have money to get me the nice Crayolas, or the nice color pencil bags or the nice backpacks, like. And I remember always feeling less than in this school, right? Like, I was just like feeling less than. But anyway, in a sense, I was still happy. Like, this whole time, like, we would go visit my mom in we would go visit her in Tijuana, and we would take her all kinds of like groceries. We take like top ramen, like everything, like big old fucking bags of food. And we would take it for my brothers, right? Because she had three of my brothers. My older brother, we didn't know where he was at anymore, and I still hadn't told anybody about the abuse. Like, I had not told anybody that he had abused me, right? So I'm like going to the school, and like, low key life is good. My grandmother does get sick, right? She ends up getting really sick, and like, she ends up needing surgery, right? So while she was in surgery, like I didn't have nowhere to go, so I was staying with people from the church, and I was staying like with random fucking people, right? Like like I had aunts and cousins in LA, and like not one of them stepped up to the plate and said, "Hey, come stay with us." Even though they live nearby. So there I am. Apparently, there's a time limit on the amount of recordings. So there I am, floating from place to place with random people from the church, feeling unwanted, feeling unloved, feeling like no one cared. I remember staying with this fucking family, and they had kids, and like the kids were fucking mean. Like they treated me like shit. Like they were like, "You don't belong here. You need to go back home." And like I didn't want to be there, and I was very timid at the time. So what ends up happening is like I start taking it out on other people, and I didn't know about this till people reached out to me as an adult, and they were like, "You were really mean to us in like school," and I had to make amends because I'm like, I am sorry, like I don't remember any of this stuff. But anyways, so what ends up happening at this time, I'm still a good kid. Like I still haven't touched drugs, I still haven't touched alcohol, I still haven't done any of that, right? Like I'm going to school, I'm going to church, I was an altar boy. Like like my grandma was a devout fucking Catholic, like devout, and so was I, believe it or not. Like I believed in God, I believed in the Bible, like I thought I was gonna go to hell, like all kinds of shit, right? So what ends up happening is like I I was a horneado, right? So I ended up losing my virginity to a girl when I was like 12 years old, 12 or 13, like yes, sick, and it lasted for about 2 fucking seconds. Like, so anyways, I ended up losing my virginity, and this is at this private school or whatever. And this girl wrote it in her fucking journal. Like she done wrote in her journal that she lost her virginity. So like it became this big old thing at the school. So me being a devout Catholic, and me thinking I was gonna burn in hell, and me thinking that, you know what I mean, that I had sinned, I went to confession, right? I went to confession, and that's where I met Father Fernando Lopez. He was my biggest abuser. That's where I met Father Fernando Lopez from the Archdiocese of Los Angeles. So I am sitting in confession, and I'm confessing my sins, and he starts asking details. Like I remember I was confessing, I was like, so I lost my virginity, I did this or whatever. And he's like asking for explicit fucking details, right? So I'm like talking, but I start feeling uncomfortable, right? Because I notice that this man is getting an erection, right? So, anyways, I end like he put his hand on my lap. I end confession, like I was like, okay, well, and he's like, do your penance, whatever. I don't even remember what the fuck he said. And I remember I walked out of confession and I ran home. Like I ran home because I was like, bro, like this man legit had a whole ass hard on, and like he's a fucking priest. Like that is fucking sick. Like that is not fucking normal, right? But anyways, so like I just let it go. Like I just moved on with my life, and this all happened in a quick period of time, right? So like I said, my grandmother was really really sickly, like really really sick, and out of nowhere, like this priest starts going to my house, like starts going to my house. Like I don't know how the fuck he found out where I lived. What, it was easy. He had access to like the school. He knew where I went to school because the school was connected to the church. So like he spotted me. And to be honest with you, I think that as a child I had a sign of victim plastered all over my face, right? Like I had a sign of like he can get taken advantage of, like he will not speak up, like you know what I mean, like because it was almost like predators were drawn to me, or I was drawn to them, whatever, right? So this man starts going to the house, right? And he starts praying with my grandmother, and he starts being a support to her, and then he starts offering her to pay for her meals, and to pay for my meals. So he would tell her, I'm gonna go get you food and I'm gonna take him with me. And my grandmother was like, okay, and that we would go on these fucking car rides, and that's when the abuse from the priest began to fucking take place. Like he would abuse me in the vehicle, and I say abuse because he was a fucking grown ass adult. I really always struggled with the fact that, like, when I was being touched, like, I would get aroused, right? And I was like, is this wrong? But at that age, 13, 14, any type of rubbing and touching is going to get you aroused regardless, right? But at the end of the day, it was wrong. At the end of the day, he was a fucking predator. At the end of the day, he was a fucking abuser and he was a fucking child molester, regardless of how my body reacted to it. And it took me a long fucking time to understand that. It took me a long time to stop blaming myself, and it's really fucking hard to talk about it like this, and to own it and say, like, hey, this fucking happened. So this man, starts pretty much like abusing me or whatever, right? So, like, I always wonder why, like, my grandmother didn't notice the signs. I always wonder, like, on one occasion we were in the house, and uh, he slapped the fuck out of me. He went like this and boom, slapped me, right? And I remember I looked at him and I slapped him back, and I took off running and he chased me to the kitchen and he slapped me once more. Like, how did my grandmother not notice that there was something off with that, right? But I don't blame my grandmother. I blame my fucking abuser. I blame him for what he did. Nobody else gets to take that blame except for him you know so anyways, I pretty much during this time we go visit my mom, right? And I haven't told anybody about my brother, and I haven't told anybody about the priest, like nobody whatsoever, like, you know what I mean? Because I was just gonna take this shit to the grave, like whatever, and it would have probably kept going on for a long time. So we go visit my mom, and my mom was in real bad shape. Her uh her baby's dad had gotten a brain aneurysm, and he just was going crazy. He was abusing my brothers, like physically, mentally, and emotionally, like beating down on them, treating them like shit. So my mom ends up leaving him, and coming back to California, and she gets her own place in downtown LA or whatever, right? And she gets her own place in downtown LA. And um the abuse continues to take place. Like, I continue to get abused by this priest. And so, sorry, my mom's ears must have been ringing because she just fucking called me, right? So, anyways, I'm still going to this Catholic school, right? And I realized, like, okay, if I want to stop the abuse, I have to cut ties with this church, with the Catholic school, because I knew that I didn't want this to continue taking place. I knew that it was wrong. Like, it didn't feel right. Like, it made me feel disgusting. Like, anyways, I had so many questions running through my head, like so many fucking questions, right? It was like an internal battle. Am I doing right? Am I doing wrong? Like, what is going on, And I mean, he would tell me shit like, your grandmother's not gonna believe you. Don't tell anybody. She's old. She's gonna die. I'm a priest. Like, nobody's gonna believe you. Da, 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 right? So I end up going to school one day. I walk straight into the principal's office and I'm like, I don't want to come to this school no more. And they're like, what? I'm like, I don't want to come to this school no more. You need to, like, transfer me to a public school. So they make this big old deal, right? Of course, because I'm like 14 at the time, I think. And they're like, who the fuck, So they call Noel Diaz, who is the one that's paying my tuition. They call my grandmother, and I have like this meltdown in the office. I tell them, I don't want to go to this school anymore. Like, I'm not going to come. I'm not going to come. So everybody kind of was like, well, what the fuck. So they kind of threw their hands up, and my grandmother put me in public school, which was Berendo Middle School, and my brothers were going to that school, right? Like, my brothers were going to that school. So that is where I started smoking weed, and that's when my addiction started kicking off. Actually, let me backtrack a little bit. I started smoking cigarettes. That was my first, mood mind altering substance, I guess. I would smoke cigarettes, and like, my grandmother was okay with it. I mean, she slapped the fuck out of me the first time she caught me smoking, but after that, it was like, okay, well, like, this is what he's gonna do. So, anyways, I start smoking weed. I start ditching. Me and my brothers are a fucking whole ass mess at this school, right? We had good times. We would like ditch, we would, fight, we would smoke weed. I introduced my brothers to weed, and I carry a lot of guilt and shame for that, because I'm like, damn, like I was their first person that introduced them to like substances, right? So at this time, like my grandmother, she ends up like developing lung cancer, right? And once again, she's in and out of the hospital. Even though I'm at this public school, the priest is still like going to the house. He's still trying to get a hold of me. Well, anyways, I remember the last time he fucking abused me. I was fucking stoned, and he went to try to abuse me and try to, do his routine and his ritual or whatever. And I remember saying no, like I freaked the fuck out. I jumped off the car and I slammed the fucking car door. I slammed that fucking car door so fucking hard that the window shattered. Prior to that, he had taken, prior to that, like to me stopping the abuse, he had taken me and my brother to Santa Monica Beach. When we went to Santa Monica, on the way back, he got in a fucking car accident, right? And I remember it was this white man. This priest didn't speak no English, and it was this white man, and he's yelling at him, and he's like, help me translate. And I'm like, no, like, bitch, you better handle this. I was hoping the guy would fuck him up. So when the cops get there, I'm like, tell them you're a priest. And he's like, shut up, don't tell them I'm a priest. And I didn't think nothing of it. I'm like, what the fuck, so anyways, like that, so they wrote a report of his name and my brother's name and my name or whatever, right? I didn't think nothing of it. And so he ends up I end up stopping the abuse, and I tell him, don't come around no more, like I'm gonna tell everybody, da, 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 da. I don't see this man after that, right? Like I don't. And so my grandma's in and out of the hospital, and here I am with a 1 bedroom apartment to myself, because my mom had her own place. So it became like the kickback spot. Like it became the fucking kickback spot. Like, so we would ditch and we would throw whole ass parties in this apartment, like whole ass fucking kickbacks, whole ass fucking, where everybody was just getting drunk and stoned. I still hadn't touched hard drugs. Everybody was getting drunk and fucking stoned, right? So, anyways, after this, like we get transferred from school to school, then we end up at Hollenbeck in East LA, me and my brothers were just a whole ass mess, like, um, so I never really graduated like middle school. They just kind of like kicked me into high school, so I end up going to Berendo High School in LA, right? And I remember um I remember the first time I tried fucking methamphetamines. Like we were kicking it in front of the school, ditching, and it's me and a bunch of girls, right? And we're fucking just turning up, right? Like there's this viejo in a van. He's bumping music, and me and these girls are just like dancing in the street, like right across the street from the school. And I see the fucking cops coming, right? So I'm like, dude, the cops. So I open this viejo's van and we jump into the fucking viejo's van, like some random ass stranger, like very safe, very secure, like jump in a stranger's van, bitch, like, So the viejo takes us, and I tell my homegirls, hey, tell him to get weed and alcohol, right? Like tell him to get some bud, tell him to get some alcohol, like let's party with this viejo, because I knew he was a pervert and he was going to try to get at my homegirls, right? So anyways, he takes us to like this dingy ass garage, and he's playing music, and we're just blazing and we're drinking or whatever. And I remember he popped out a baggie, right? And he put a key in it, and he put it to his nose, and he offered it to everybody, right? And everybody was like, no, 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 no. And me wanting to be cool, I'm like, fuck it, I'll try it, right? So there I go. I take 2 fucking key shots to the fucking nose, right? And instantly, bitch, I said, whoop, and like I told my whole life story to these random people, to these girls, in a matter of like 10 seconds, bitch. Like I told them about the abuse with my brother. I told them about the abuse with the priest. Like I told them about the abandonment issues. I told them everything, bitch. Like every fucking thing. Like I was just like, I let it fucking rip, right? And I was like, what the fuck? So anyways, this viejo ends up dropping me off at my apartment or whatever. And at this time, my grandmother pretty much has like terminal lung cancer. So she's already in the hospital. She's already like, there's no her getting out. Like once she was there, it was bad. And I remember the night that I tried methamphetamines, right? I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what I had put up my nose. And I was laying in bed and I was tripping out. And I was like, oh my God, like, I don't like this feeling. I don't like this feeling. I don't like this feeling. So I called my homegirl because I knew fucking Susia stayed with this viejo, right? I call her and I'm like, hey, ask him what by the way, he gave me a little bag to take with me, which was really nice of him at the time, right? So, anyways, I call this girl and I'm like, bitch, what did he give me? Because I don't like the way I'm feeling. Like, I had never done this. Like, what is this shit? Like, I want to go to sleep. I can't go to sleep. I'm crawling out of my skin. Like, what the fuck do I do? What do I do? And she asked him, what did you give him? And the guy was like, it was crystal meth. And I'm like, tell him I don't feel good. Tell him, what do I need to do to feel better? Blah. And he was like, the guy told her to tell me to do more and that I would feel better. So I was like, okay. So I pulled out the baggie. I did more. And instantly I knew I felt better, right? So I quickly learned that if I didn't want to feel the come down and I didn't want to feel nasty and I didn't want to feel the way I was feeling, that I just needed to continue to do more methamphetamines. That's all I needed to continue to do is go continue to do more methamphetamines and you'll be fine, right? So anyways, my grandmother ends up getting put on hospice. So she comes to my mom's house. And then from my mom's house, she goes to my aunt's house. And by this time, my grandmother low key had a lot of resentments towards me, because I low key treated her like shit. Like, I'm not even gonna lie. Like, I treated her like shit. I was a spoiled ass fucking brat, that when I wouldn't get my way, I would throw fucking fits, like little ass fucking fits, right? And my grandmother is in fucking hospice, at my aunt's house. And I start like, I'm doing methamphetamines, right? But I wasn't doing them heavily. Like, I didn't know how to get them. I didn't know like what, like, you know what I mean? I just knew what I had tried. And I knew that if I didn't want to feel the way I was feeling, that I needed to continue to do more. Anyways, fast forward a little bit. We get kicked out of the apartment. They give us 30 days to get out of that one bedroom apartment because I was just a mess. The rent wasn't being paid because my grandmother was in the hospital. And in that period of time, my grandmother's in hospice and she ends up dying. I get a fucking call and my mom tells me, come to your tia's house because your grandmother passed away. And I get a ride to my tia's house, and there she is, laying stiff as fuck, like not moving. And I'm like, trying, grandma, wake up, and she's just not fucking moving. Prior to that, I had gone to see her at my aunt's house a few times, but my grandma wanted nothing to do with me because my aunt thought it was a good idea to tell her on her deathbed that I was a homosexual and that I like men. Like, why the fuck would you tell my grandmother that as she's dying? Like, what is the fucking purpose, And of course, that was completely against what my grandmother was for, right? She was like a devout Catholic. And keep in mind, I haven't told anybody what this priest has done. I haven't told anybody what my brother has done. So I remember going to see my grandmother prior to her dying, like a few weeks, maybe a month. And I remember trying to talk to her and saying, Grandma, like, how are you? And she was already blind, but she could hear and she pulled her hand back. So what that told me is that she didn't want me around her. She didn't want me to. She didn't want me to be with her, right? So the last time I went, it was when she had died. And I remember I was sitting there, I was a fucking mess. I was on one, I was crying, and the coroners get there and they literally put my grandmother on a fucking tarp or whatever it is they use and they roll her over like a fucking carpet. And I remember I tried attacking the coroner guys. They hold me back. There was another father figure in my life, my godfather, my Nino, who I met at church too. This man has been solid, is still solid to this day, had my back. I'll touch a little bit on him in a little bit because he's been like a positive influence in my life. But anyways, so they dragged my grandmother out, and I tried chasing the coroner van. And I end up getting dropped off in downtown LA back at home by my Nino, and I quickly start finding dope. Like I am like, where do I find dope? Like what do I do? So I start walking around and I start fucking using, bitch. Like that is when my addiction kicked off. Like I mean, I was tweaking daily, 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 daily. I was tweaking so fucking much. Like I would go weeks without fucking sleeping, like weeks without sleeping. I was probably like 100 fucking pounds, soaking wet, and I still thought I looked good, bitch. I was like, but I really didn't. I looked like I was fucking dying. At this time, I'm probably like 15 years old, when she died. And I used so much to numb my grandmother. I used so much to like not feel what I was feeling, We didn't have money to bury her or whatever, right? So my family did my tia and my mom dirty. My grandmother's brother, they paid for the services, but they didn't pay for a headstone or anything. And fuck, it's hard, bitch. It's hard to tell your fucking story from beginning to end. It really is. So I hope you've stuck around this fucking far, If you stuck around, drop a comment. But anyways, fuck. Um, I got so spun out that I almost missed my grandmother's funeral. I almost missed her funeral, because I was so on one, I end up going to her funeral services and I'm like busting lines in the fucking bathroom and I'm fucking crying and I'm just a fucking mess, And I was dating some guy at the time who like got me dope to calm me down or whatever. Like, great, great, great relationship, right? Like, get me dope, bitch. Calm me down, you know the day of her burial. I remember I was at the fucking cemetery smoking fucking dope, bro. Like smoking dope as they're lowering her into the ground in front of everybody seeing what the fuck I'm doing and nobody stopping me, right? um I remember, let me backtrack a little bit. So we didn't have money to bury her. So I walked around the neighborhood collecting money and I was going to turn the money over. Like I really was, But my addiction told me, your grandmother would want you to get high with this money so you don't feel the pain. I know it sounds sick. I know it sounds twisted, but that's what my motherfucking head told me. That's what my fucking head told me. So I got high with the money, bitch. And I carried a lot of shame and guilt for that. But in my recovery, I was able to make amends for that you know so anyways, I my grandmother's death is done and over with, right? And I just continue to fucking use. My mom used to look for me. My mom would look for me at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning in downtown LA, right? Because I was so smoked out. And I remember the time she found me, right? The time she found me, she caught me smoking dope, and I looked at her, and I handed the pipe to the fool I was kicking it with, and I go up to my mom, and I'm like, "Mom, let me walk you home," And I told my mom, I'm like, "Mom, don't look for me. Like, I'm not gonna stop using. I'm gonna continue to get high. Like, there's no reason for you to be out here at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, right?" And that's when she stopped looking for me. That's when she stopped looking for me. My disease was in full effect. My addiction was in full effect. Crystal meth and just drugs as a whole had a fucking grip on me. Like they had a fucking grip on me. Like you can't fucking believe, like my whole world revolved around fucking drugs, right? Getting some more and finding ways and means. Like I was willing to do whatever it take. I became a bottom of the barrel fucking junkie. Like, I I would rob and steal. I would break into houses. I would snatch purses. I would steal cars. I would rob the paisas. I would degrade myself. Like I had lost the self-esteem, the respect, the dignity. I had lost the desire to fucking live. Like I didn't want to do it anymore. I did not want to fucking do it anymore. I wanted to die. Like I welcomed fucking death. I was okay with dying. Like, death sounded good to me. That sounded good to me. You know what I mean? I wasn't afraid of death. Like I was like, fuck it, I'm gonna die a drug addict's death, and that's gonna be that, and I'm gonna be okay with it, and nobody's gonna care. Blah 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 blah. Right? So I continue to fucking use. Like it was sad. It was a lonely, dark fucking place. And I remember like some of the loneliest times were like I'd be on one in the middle of the night, you know, and I would walk and like get to a corner and look straight and look right and look left and wonder like where do I go? Like no direction, no fucking purpose, right? I need to take a break because this does take a toll on you. So I'll be right back.